Episode number 1 of the Sizzle Basketball Podcast. These episodes will be around 40 minutes long. We're going to cover 2 teams today, so it'll be about 20 minutes total for each team. And if you have an opportunity to, go check out the Instagram. It's at Sizzle Podcast. On there you'll find, the podcast schedule. You'll find Instagram posts. You'll find polls. Well, the post will be about which podcast is upcoming. You'll find polls. We're going to do these podcasts on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, so 3 times a week. For now, I'm just going to put them on YouTube. My YouTube channel is in the bio of my Instagram, so click on that link and go subscribe. And yeah, it's going to be all NBA talk. We're going to go through all 30 teams, so we're going to do 2 teams a day. So that will take us to April 28th. And then after that, I'll let you guys, the fans, decide what we should talk about next before the playoffs come. Because the playoffs are coming late May, I believe. Yeah, late May. So we'll let the fans decide what they want to do in terms after the team podcast. But we definitely want to get the team podcast done now. So I'm going to start today with the New York Knicks and the Portland Trail Blazers. So we'll start with the Knicks first because they're in the East, and then we'll follow with Portland. Wow, what can you really say about the Knicks this year? It's been an absolute shock that they're so good, and I'm really happy to see them playing this well, and it's very exciting to watch them play this well, because I don't think any of us, realistically expected them to play this well yet. I think we said, okay, you wait another year or 2, and then they'll play this well. They're number 5 in the East right now. They're playing really good basketball, right? They're winning games consistently. They have had times they lose 2 or 3 in a row, but then they bounce back and they win 4 or 5 in a row. Very unlike this team last year. This team last year was like all over the place. They won 1 in a row, 2 in a row, and then they would lose it 10 in a row. So it hasn't been like that this year. They haven't had a lot of long losing streaks, which I think is part of the reason why they've been able to maintain a steady record. They're 24 and 23. So, that's part of the reason why they've been able to maintain a steady record. They haven't really dropped too many in a row, and it's a big thing. When they lose, they get right back up on their feet, and they just keep going. So, it's a mindset you got to have, for these young teams to have a mindset. For a young team like the Knicks to have a mindset like that, that's big because it shows you that they got a lot of potential ahead of them, right? Let's talk about Julius Randle first. Made his first All-Star game this season. Shout out to him. Congratulations. That was big, right? For a guy who got drafted by the Lakers, played behind guys like D'Lo, Jordan Clarkson, Lonzo for the last year or 2 of Julius Randle's time in LA. And then he also played behind Brandon Ingram. So, when you're playing behind Ingram, Lonzo, D'Lo, right? D'Lo and Lonzo, they're guys. I'm just explaining the guys he played behind. Jordan Clarkson. It's tough. And he was even there when Kobe was there for a while too. So it's tough because it doesn't allow Julius Randle to develop his game because he's looked at as a 4th or 5th option on the offensive end every single night. So they only go to him when everyone else is struggling, and then he always would show out whenever everyone else is struggling. And people would be like, oh, does he have potential? Does he not? He's not consistent. Well, the reason he wasn't consistent is because he wasn't getting the rock enough, right? So now that you see Julius Randle go to the Knicks, and it was the same thing with the Pelicans, with the Lakers. You're playing behind AD and Drew Holiday when he was in New Orleans for a little while. So, now he goes to the Knicks, and all of a sudden you see the potential because he's the number 1 player on that team, and he's able to say, okay, put the ball in my hands the whole game, and I'm going to do a little bit of everything for you. Great passer, great rebounder, great defender, great scorer from all 3 areas of the floor. Great mid-range. He uses that mid-range step back all the time. He's got a good post fade. He's physical. He's great at drawing fouls. And like I said, he's got that. I like that little post fade. He does that little post fade around the free throw line, and he makes it a lot. If he doesn't make it, he draws a foul a lot. Great 3-point shot too. Make him a high clip. One game he had like 6 or 7, and he shot like 11. It's crazy for a power forward, for anyone, but for a power forward. Julius Randle's development is definitely taking a huge step forward. He's only 25. He could be an all-star 5 or 6 times by the time his career is over, if not more. Julius Randle has a lot of potential. And he's not being paid a crazy amount right now, but his contract's coming up, I think, maybe this year it's a player option. I'm not sure, but my guess is the way Randall seems like he's getting along with a lot of those young guys like Emmanuel quickly and RJ and Obi Toppin, right? I think he'll stay. I mean, that would be my guess. I would think Julius Randle would sign a max and stay. If I'm the Knicks front office, I'm going to pay Julius Randle a max. Make sure he stays because you need him on that team, right? This is a team that has surpassed their rebuild, right? Which means they're ahead of where they're supposed to be on their rebuild, right? It's kind of like the Heat last year. The Heat were ahead of where they were supposed to be on the rebuild. With all those young guys, nobody expected the Heat to be in the finals last year, but they were. So, now you look at it like this, and it's like, okay, the Heat were ahead of the rebuild last year, and now the Knicks are kind of ahead of the rebuild too. That's a great sign for a young team. If a young team can be ahead of their rebuild, that's the best sign you can have for a young team because it shows you that this is a team that's going to be really good for a long time. That's what it shows you, right? So as long as the Knicks keep, developing their players well and learning how to keep the rotations the right way and the minutes right, because those are some things they struggled with last year. Bringing in Thibodeau really helps. And if they're able to do that, man, the Knicks are going to be good for a long, long time. I'm going to be very interested to see what the Knicks do this year in the playoffs. I think they'll make it. And what the Knicks are going to be able to do for the next couple of years. It's one of the more exciting teams in the league to watch. So you have a chance, man. You got to go check out. You got to go check out and watch the Knicks, man. They're fun to watch. R.J. Barrett. I mean, what else can we say about his development this year? He's been great. R.J. Barrett's been great this season. He's taken his game to a whole other level on both ends of the floor. We know what he can do offensively. He's got a really quick first step. He can get to the rim at will. He can draw fouls. He makes his free throws. The mid-range game was a little struggle. He struggled with a little bit last year. Same with the three ball. This year he shooting the mid-range great. Shooting the three ball solid. But you see these, upticks in RJ Barrett's game percentage-wise, and you watch him, and you could just tell when you watch him this year he's more aggressive. He wants to win more, right? He plays smarter. He's not just taking this shot and that shot. He's taking the right shots, and that just comes with development. RJ Barrett went number 3 in the draft last year, right, and had a little bit of a shaky rookie year. A lot of rookies do. A lot of players end up having shaky rookie years and end up being Hall of Famers, All-Stars, legends, right? So you can't base a guy off his first season in the league. Second season to me is kind of like where second or third season is kind of where you look at it and you're like, okay, this is where we can see we can now kind of see where this guy's going to go. So, a guy like Tyler Hero, right? We'll talk about him on the Heat podcast. The Heat podcast is going to be on Friday. We'll talk about Tyler Hero. We'll give Tyler Hero a couple minutes and we'll talk about him. And I'll give my opinion on what Tyler Hero did last year and what he's been able to do this year. But back with RJ Barrett's taking a huge leap forward. A lot of those second-year guys in the league have not. Of course, Zion and Ja have, but a lot of these other second-year guys have not. So, when you take a huge leap forward in your second year, that's a big sign because a lot of guys play a really good rookie year and then they fall off their second year. RJ played a solid rookie year, not great, solid, and is playing a great second year. It's a good sign for the future of RJ Barrett and what the Knicks have in him, right? Like I said, he's just been way more efficient, which is one thing he struggled with last year. He's been way better on the defensive end. He's passing the ball better. He's moving it better. He's rebounding better. And he's just playing in the game more. He understands the feel of the NBA now. I think last year he kind of struggled with it. Now he kind of understands the feel of it. He understands the speed of the game. And ask any NBA player that's a vet. Once you figure out the speed of the game and you figure out other players' games in the league, which I think RJ has, you're good. You'll be a good player in the league. A lot of guys can't adjust to the speed of the game. When the game starts slowing down for you, that's when you're playing at a high level. Right? The game is really fast, right, overall, but when the game starts slowing down for you, right, think about that. That's when you're playing at a high level. Right? When the game starts slowing down where you can look and say, okay, I'm going to go up, I'm going to take this shot, I'm going to make this pass. When you can do those decisions quick, but it slows down for you. Everything feels like it's just flowing the right way, right? So, when something like that happens, that's when, a player is taking his next step in development, right? So RJ Barrett, you just watch him, you can see the games slow down for him. He's getting into it easy. He's getting into the flow of the game easy, right? So, that means a lot. right? So RJ Barrett, huge step in development. Another guy this team has really relied their hats on this year has been the rookie Emmanuel Quickly. He's been great. Love watching him play. He's got a really quick first step. Gets to the rim at will. His floater's great. So, I mean, for a guy like Quickly to be able to develop a floater in his first year in the league, that's huge because a lot of guys don't develop that floater, until their third or fourth year. Look at CJ McCollum, right? He has one of the better floaters in the league, but he didn't develop it till his third or fourth year. A floater's a tough shot, right? A floater's a really tough shot. When you take a floater, you have to have an awareness of where the defense is more than when you take a layup. You have to have an awareness of knowing that I'm not going to be able to draw contact really on a floater. So if I go up and I get it blocked or I miss it, that's the possession. Pretty much, right? Somebody gets an offensive rebound, okay, but you don't want to rely on that. With the layup, pretend you're Emmanuel Quickly, you go down the lane, you see Bam Adebayo sitting at the rim, right? They played the Heat last night and lost, by the way. But pretend you go down the lane, you see Bam at the rim, right? You go up if you're like, okay, Bam's probably going to pack me, right? But you can be like, I'll just go. I'm going to go really hard. I'm going to go physical, and I'm going to try to draw a foul and lean my body into him. You can do that, right? Yeah, Bam might block you. Bam, you might just miss it. But there's also a good chance you might make it or you might draw a foul. But the main thing here is that you have a good chance to draw a foul if you go strong. But the floater, the way your body's positioned and the way you take that shot, nobody really draws a foul on a floater. It has to be really bad defense on someone's end to foul a shooter that's taking a floater. So, that's the tough thing about a floater. Like, it's a risky shot to take for a rookie to take as much as Quickly takes. So for him to take in his first year, that's huge. And some of the threes he hits too are just really good. He hits some like crazy step back threes, where the defense is all in his face. He's not afraid of the big moment. You can tell. He'll take 20 shots a night, even if he only makes 7. He'll keep taking them. He could be 20% field goal. He'll just keep taking them if he feels like he can make them. And that's what's made him so special this season for this team. He's not afraid of the moment. The Knicks didn't have a lot of guys like that last year. Right? Quickly comes in as a rookie. He's not afraid of the moment. He's ready to go. He wants to be great. You can tell, and he's going to be great. He's averaging, I think, 12.5 this season as a rookie. Great numbers for a rookie. Unreal. And it's not just that he's averaging 12 games. He's not getting a lot of minutes. He's starting, but he's only getting like 23 minutes a night. Think about that minutes to point ratio. I mean, that's crazy. So, and he's pretty solid on the defensive end too. He's got to work on his playmaking a little bit, but that will come as he develops his game and he gets older in the league. Right? That's a trait, that the ability to pass the ball, not a trait, but that's a skill that a lot of young players in the league don't have, even guards. So, no, but for him to develop his scoring like this already in his rookie year, and now we can just add that passing on there because he can play defense. And he's going to be a great player for a long time. And another guy I'm really excited for this team to watch. But as you know, like, you look at all the teams in the league, all the teams in the playoffs, right? I'm going to throw out a couple examples. I'm going to throw out a couple of names. You tell me what all these guys have in common, right? Robert Covington, Royce O'Neal, KCP, right? Marcus Morris, right? Those are the guys I'll go over for now, but those couple guys that I named, what do they all have in common? They're all 3-and-D guys, right? They're all great 3-and-D guys. And all those teams that I just named, they're all contending teams, right? They're all contending teams. Chris Middleton for the Bucks as well. They're all contending teams, right? I can go as far as say Danny Green for the Sixers, even though he struggled with the 3-ball in the playoffs before. I think he still hits a decent amount of threes and he plays great defense every night. Those are all 3-and-D guys. Knicks have a guy like that. Reggie Bullock. Right? Reggie Bullock's had a really good season. He's averaging around 10, I think. But if you can get a 3-and-D guy to average around 10, that's what most of them average, the good ones. The Robert Covingtons of the world, the Royce O'Neals of the world, the KCPs, they all average right around 10 or 12. That's all you need. Because when they're averaging 10 or 12, they're doing it efficiently because they only take threes, really. and they can get to the rim sometimes, right? But they mainly take threes. But they take the smart threes. They don't throw out bad threes. They take only smart ones that they know they can make, so they make them. Reggie Bullock's shooting like 40% from three this year. And he's made a good amount of threes, too. I mean, he's making like 2.5 a game. But the thing about Reggie Bullock is he's one of the better defenders in the league at the shooting guard spot. Right, so guys like that are so valuable. I mean, to me, I'd rather have a guy that, can shoot a three at like a B+, A- range, like a Royce O'Neal or a Robert Covington or Gary Trent even, right? Gary Trent's a good defender. He gets you the three ball. I'd rather have a guy like that, right, than have a guy that just shoots the three ball and can only do that. That's my opinion, right? I think those 3 guys are more valuable than the only 3 guys. They're way more valuable. I don't care if the 3-point shooters, score 3 or 4 more or 5 more points per game. Who cares? They're a liability defensively. Reggie Bullock is going to give me 10 points every night. At least. Some nights he might give me more, or less. Some nights he might give me more. But I can guarantee that Reggie Bullock's going to give me everything he's got on the defensive end of the floor. And he's gonna play the opponent's best player every single night on defense. And hold his own. Not every single time, but for the most part, hold his own. And then he's gonna hit a couple threes every night. And he's gonna hit them efficiently. He's gonna make 2 or 3 nights, he's gonna take 5. Right? So it's kind of just like those guys are so valuable for the Knicks to have a guy like that. That's a guy they need to keep. It's a guy they should not just be like, wash him away. We don't need to keep him. No, I know you got a young team and you're going to be good for a long time and you want to keep your young guys. But make sure you keep Reggie Bullock because he's going to be a big part of this team. Reggie Bullock's going to be a big part of what this team is going to be able to do moving forward. He's a guy you're going to want there because when you get into playoff series, and the Knicks do have a lot of good defenders, right? We're going to get into one of their really good defenders who just got hurt recently in a second, but when you get into a playoff series, right, you need 3-and-D guys. Every team last year that was competing kind of had one, right? The Heat and the Lakers in the finals. The Heat had Jay Crowder. The Lakers had KCP, right? I mean, every team has some sort of 3-and-D guy. Last year the Nuggets had Gary Harris in the Western Conference Finals. And then the Eastern Conference Finals, Boston, you could look at Boston and say they had Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart shoots the 3-ball pretty well, especially in the playoffs. Look at his playoff 3-point percentage. And he's one of the best defenders in the league, right? Nobody's gonna deny that. So every team needs a 3-and-D guy, right? So I think for, the Knicks, Reggie Bullock is a guy that should be very valuable to their team and they should work on that contract extension now, right? Or not now, but when the offseason hits, they need to work on that extension. He's going to pay like $2 million a year now. Give him 10 or 12. He's worth it. Trust me. Down the long run, Reggie Bullock will be worth 10 or 12 because he's going to give you, 120, 130 plus threes a night. He's going to shoot a 3-ball at least 37%, and he's going to D up the opponent's best player every night. So it's another guy that just the Knicks need to make sure they keep in that organization because it will really help the team moving forward. We've been talking all good things about the Knicks so far. The one bad thing that really happened the other day was the injury of Mitchell Robinson, right? Mitchell Robinson is one of the more underrated players in the league. Great defender. I love watching him play. Great rebounder. Really physical on both ends of the floor. Doesn't take a lot of shots. Doesn't really have an offensive package quite yet to his game. But he takes limited shots, but he makes the limited shots he takes, so that's what makes him so good. He shoots a really high field goal percentage. He needs work at the free throw line. Right, but that will come and go. That will come with development in the league, right? That every center never starts out good at the free throw line, for the most part. But great defender, great shot blocker. He's like a staple on that defensive end. They need him down low because Tom Thibodeau, he loves shot blockers. He had Carlos Boozer in Chicago and Joakim Noah, and then in Minnesota, he had Taj too. Towns, as great as a player as Towns is, I wouldn't really look at Towns as a good shot blocker defender because he's really not a great defender. But Towns is an unreal player, right? But Thibodeau has always had guys that have kind of just been dogs down low and just, block shots, and not just block shots, like they're good defenders too. And that's what Mitchell Robinson is. There's a lot of guys in the league that average a lot of blocks a game, but they're not great defenders, right? So, for a guy like Mitchell Robinson to be a great shot blocker, but not only that, he stays in front of his defenders, he switches on screens, right? He's strong, he's physical, he's quick, right? He's athletic. He's long. So he has every tool that a good defensive player has. Or a great defensive player, sorry. every tool that he has is what a great defensive player has, and that's what makes him so special. So they're saying mid-May he could come back, but they're also saying he could be out for the year. So for the Knicks, I hope he comes back mid-May. I hope they can get him into some regular season games before the playoffs come, right? Because if that's able to be the case, he can burn off some of that rust because he's going to miss some time. He's already missed a good amount of games this year. So, if he can burn off that rust, that'll be big because it will allow the Knicks to have somebody down low who can, erase big center nights, right? When they go and they play the Sixers. He can do a decent job against Embiid. If they play the Heat, do a good job against Bam, right? You play the Bucks, do a good job against Brook Lopez and Giannis, right? So, Mitchell Robinson is a guy that this team needs, right? Praying for him that he gets a speedy recovery. So hopefully he comes back because he, in my opinion, he really is one of the guys that makes this team, gel, right? They play even better with him on the court. So I know they miss him out there. They want him back. They're going to need him. So hopefully he's able to come back around playoff or before playoff time so he can get back into the gist of the game, and then in the playoffs it's easy flow and he can just show the world what he's capable of doing. So that will do it for the Knicks podcast. Talked about some great topics with the Knicks. Make sure you go tune in and watch the Knicks play because they're a really fun team to watch. If you have any questions about the New York Knicks, just make sure to send me a DM or whatever. I'm going to put my phone number on my Instagram as well. Shoot me a text, send me a DM. We can have debates about the New York Knicks. We can even have debates about the upcoming team. I'm about to talk about Portland, right? So we can do those different things. So yeah, just let me know. All right, so now on to the second segment of podcast number 1. It's going to be about the Portland Trail Blazers. So let's get right into it. Portland, pretty much just like every year in the regular season. Last year they struggled a little bit during the regular season because of injuries. They're one of the top teams in the West. They sit at number 6 right now in the West. Very crowded West, a very good West. Right, a lot of surprising teams this year that we'll get to. Utah, Phoenix, very surprising. Even San Antonio to an extent. So yeah, Portland's looking really good this year. I think this is the best team they've had that Lillard's ever been on, in my opinion. Lillard's playing at an all-time level. He's playing his best season in his career. McCollum's playing the best season of his career. They just brought in Norman Powell. He's a great player. Played 2 games already with this team. Yeah, 2 games. He's looked great. His first game, I think he had 22. Second game, he had 14. He's looked great. He's going to be really good for them on the offensive end, but not just that. On the defensive end, he's solid too. And then last offseason they went in and they added Robert Covington, which was a huge addition because this was a team who last year struggled defensively. They didn't really have anybody that could really put pressure on offensive players, right? And Robert Covington's that guy. You come in, you add Norman Powell, like I just mentioned. He's another guy who could put pressure on good offensive players, right? But Robert Covington's the main one. That's why they brought him in. Really good 3-and-D guy. I mentioned him not too long ago in the Knicks section of the podcast. But yeah, huge additions for the Knicks, huge additions for Portland. They also added offseason Derrick Jones Jr. Solid addition, right? So they did their part in adding the guys that they needed and filling the holes that they needed. They added Enes Kanter. Portland had a huge issue last year rebounding the basketball, right? Something that they really struggle with. And he's a guy that gets a lot of, not just rebounds, he gets a lot of offensive rebounds. Had like 9 or 10 against the Heat a week ago. I watched that game. That was a great game. But had like 9 or 10 rebounds offensively against the Heat last week. And, when you got all those shooters on the wing, Powell, McCollum, Lillard, when you have when you have an offensive rebounder like Enes Kanter, it helps a lot. And the only thing that Enes Kanter really needs to work on, and it's kind of been a downfall of his career, and he's had a good career, but it's been the defensive end. He's terrible on the defensive end, right? He really can't defend any center in the league on the defensive end. So, that's one aspect that, he needs to work on, and that would honestly even help this team more if he can develop his defense for the rest of the season. But, they'll get Nurkic back soon. Nurkic is a little better of a player than Kanter, in my opinion. Not as good as a rebounder, but he's a better scorer. He's a better defender. And then, they'll bring Kanter off the bench when the playoffs come. That's going to be great. Kanter coming off the bench, he can still give you 9, 10 rebounds off the bench, and 4 or 5 of those are going to be offensive. Right? It's weird. He's not a great defensive rebounder. He's a great offensive rebounder. That's why his rebound numbers are so high. But him coming off the bench is going to help because you look last year, their backup center in the playoffs was Whiteside. And Whiteside just didn't give them any effort. He didn't really care. He didn't want to be there. Right? Kind of like Miami. Whiteside didn't want to be in Miami. Doesn't seem like he wants to be in Sacramento either. I don't even know if he wants to play basketball or not. It's really tough to tell sometimes. But Nurkic Nurkic coming back for that team is going to be big. And then you have Cantor coming off the bench. He's a much better player than Whiteside. Last year, the Lakers just attack Whiteside every time when Portland brought him in. Because Nurkic can't play the full game, He can't play the full 48. So, when they brought in Whiteside at the bench, it was atrocious on both ends of the floor. So, now that you bring in Enes Kanter, he's going to be atrocious on defense at times, but will be a help on the offensive board and the offensive end. So, yeah, he's a big help. Robert Covington, we already mentioned him. We'll get to Lillard and McCollum in a second, but another thing I want to talk about with this team is their depth. They have more depth this year, right? Anthony Simons, they had him last year. This is his third year in the league, but he's playing way better this year on both ends of the floor. He's putting the ball on the floor more. He's got a quick first step. He can get to the rim at will. He's got a good 3-shot. He makes it consistently this year, something that he couldn't do last year. Like I said, he puts the ball on the floor, so he's able to handle it now. Last year, he kind of just shot threes and cut here and there. He's a big part of the rotation this year. Last year, he wasn't. So the fact that he's able to put the ball on the floor now is why he's been a big part of this rotation, because he can not only make plays for himself, he can make plays for everyone else too. So Simons has been great. He's been a huge staple for this team off the bench. Now with Norman Powell coming into town, that will take Melo out of the starting lineup. It will slide Robert Covington. Sorry, not slide Robert Covington. It will keep Robert Covington at the 4. And then you'll take Melo out of the starting lineup and insert Norman Powell. So Melo will come off the bench as your 6th man, him or Simons, right? And Melo's played great this year. He's averaging 14, but it's not that he's averaging 14. It's like pretty much what he averaged last year. Look how efficient he is this year. Like when you watch him this year compared to when you saw Melo play last year, it's like, ooh, it's a huge difference because Melo is like taking and making the shots that he knows like he should be taking, right? Like he's taking the shots he knows he should be taking. And he's making them. Last year, I kind of like, I think he took off so much time for basketball when he came in last season that he kind of just like fell out of the groove and what it was like to play NBA ball. Now you can tell he's back in his groove a little bit. He's taking great shots this year. He's very efficient. It's a great thing for a guy like Carmelo. Because, when they get to the playoffs, Carmelo's a guy they're going to need. As great as Lillard and McCollum have been in the playoffs in their career, Melo's going to be a guy that they're going to need to rely on a decent amount. And last year he struggled. Just took the wrong shots. Really, when you watch him, he just forced shots. This year he's not forcing shots. He's taking the right shots. If he doesn't have the right shot, he just passes it out. And he moves it along. He doesn't play ISO. So, big thing for Portland there. He's been a little improved defensively, which has helped him too. So that's another big factor for Portland. But now on to the two superstars of this team, right? Lillard and McCollum. So, Lillard, man, what can you say about his season, right? I mean, best season of his career, in my opinion. The one thing about Lillard I want to say really quick is Lillard's always been a solid playmaker, but the last 2 or 3 years he's developed into a great playmaker. A great playmaker. One of the better playmakers in the league, in my opinion. And that has really helped this team because it's opened up, the floor for everyone else to make plays. Because he doesn't go ISO every play anymore. If he doesn't have something he likes, he moves the ball. Right? So, scoring at a crazy rate again, like previous years. Really efficient, again, like previous years. Passing the ball way better than he has before. But he's just had games where you look at where McCollum was out for a month and a half, 2 months. Lillard stepped up. He was huge. Lillard came in there and they still won 65, 70% of the games, I want to say. They were great. Melo stepped up big during that absence of McCollum too, but Lillard was hitting game winners, 40-point games, 50-point games, right? And super efficient too. And those 40, 50-point games were coming with 9, 10, 11 assists too. So yeah, Lillard's been super efficient this year. It's been the best year of his career, as I mentioned. He's just taken off, and I think part of the reason why Lillard's playing so well this year, he always does, but I think part of the reason why he's playing extremely well this year is because I think he's a little pissed off. I think he has a little motivation. I think he's a little upset that he wasn't named a starter for the All-Star game. And I know it sounds like, he's probably not upset. Well, I think he is. Lillard takes that kind of stuff personal. Remember last year when Portland in the bubble played the Clippers? Like, Portland was playing like the last 3 games of the bubble, right? And they were fighting with Memphis for the 8th seed, and they needed to win like almost every one of the remaining games. And they lost, I think, this game to the Clippers, which gave them the 2-game series against Memphis. The first one to win 2 games against Memphis, I think it was. Right? They're the first team to win 2. And if they had won this game, they would have clinched, but then they had to go and play Memphis in a best-of-3 series, and they won. But Lillard, I think Portland was up like, let's say, 2 or 3. Like 40 seconds left, 30 seconds left. Lillard just had to sink 2 free throws, and that was game. He missed both free throws, and that's so rare for such a clutch player that's such a great free throw shooter. Right? He missed 2 free throws. And I'll never forget, like, Patrick Beverley on the bench and Paul George and Marcus Morris were there laughing at him and jumping up and down. And Lillard took that personal. Right? He didn't just sit back and say, forget it, they're just messing around with me or trolling. Lillard took that personal. I mean, if you saw the interview after when they asked Lillard, they said, what do you think about that? And he's like, I didn't even see it. But he's like, to be honest, he said, I've knocked Paul George out of the playoffs before, and I've knocked Patrick Beverley out of the playoffs before, so they shouldn't be talking. And he's right. Those guys shouldn't be talking about Lillard like that. Neither of those guys are anywhere in the same stratosphere as Damian Lillard. Right? So Damian Lillard took it personal, and then guess what he did? He went and dropped 45, right, on Memphis, and then he dropped like 48 the next night. And then the game 1 against the Lakers, he went and dropped like 50. Like, he took it personal. Lillard's the kind of guy you don't want. Stephen A. Smith said too, you don't want to mess with Damian Lillard. He takes it personal because when guys start taking things like that personal, man, they play even better, right? So I think Lillard not making the All-Star game, he'll take that personal. He'll give him more motivation for the rest of the season moving forward. Lillard's number 2 in MVP votes right now, right? I think he should win it this year, but my gut feeling, the league doesn't give it to him. And that's good for Lillard, you know why? Because that'll give him even more motivation. Because he should win MVP. I mean, McCollum missed them 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months. And they still had a very solid winning record. Portland's like top 6 seed in the West right now. Right? Imagine if McCollum was there, all year. They could be, I can make a good argument that they could be a number 3 seed right now. So, no, for the fact that McCollum was out that long and Lillard was still able to keep this team high in the standings, that should serve for an MVP case, in my opinion. Right? And then, McCollum. I mean, how great has CJ McCollum been this year? He's been great. Right? I mean, we always knew how good of a player CJ McCollum was. It was just a matter of, being able to stay consistent, right? That was an issue with him at times, right? Some nights he would have 28, other nights he would have 14. He was averaging like 27, I think, before his injury, sorry. I think he definitely would have made the All-Star game if he didn't get injured, right? And, a bunch of commentators and this and that, a lot of people have said that McCollum definitely would have been an All-Star if he didn't get hurt, right? So, best season of McCollum's career, just the same with Lillard, right? Best season of his career, shooting the 3 ball 40%. Huge number because, McCollum's one of the top 3 shooters in the league. 3 ball wise, in my opinion, right? Clay's not healthy, so other than like Steph and maybe Lillard, I think McCollum might be the 3rd best in the league. I really do. He's deadly from 3, man. He shoots a lot, but he's shooting it efficient too. Like, that's the crazy thing. And he can get to the rim. He's got a great mid-range shot. Step back is money, man. He hits that step back like it's nothing. Smooth too, like the way he takes that step back off the dribble. That mid-range area. He likes to shoot in the corners, the mid-range area. Shots money every time. I tell you, man, watching McCollum play is like, he's one of my favorite players to watch play because he's just so smooth the way he plays. He's such a pure scorer. And he's really, the last couple of years, developed his ability to get other guys involved too, which has been big for Portland. He's one of the more underrated playmakers in the league. He just, like, before, a couple years ago, it was kind of just like if he wasn't scoring, he wasn't affecting the game because he's not a great defender, really. Now it's like if he's not scoring, he gets other guys involved, right? And he does it without turning it over a lot. So he sees the floor really well. He kind of plays the point guard spot too for Portland as well. Lillard's a main point guard, right? But McCollum also plays the point guard spot too. He brings the ball to the floor a lot and distributes it. So no, McCollum's having the best year of his career. It's going to give Portland an even better chance to do something this year in the playoffs than they have in recent years. I mean, you think 2 years ago, they made the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. A lot of people forget that. You know, you look at that team and you compare it to the team they have this year. This team they have this year is playing much better, and they are better, right? So, like, you know, that team can make the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, and I get it. The West was different, right? I don't see why a team like this can make the Western Conference Finals, right? The goal for Portland should be, though, to be a top 5 seed, right? Hopefully you can get to a 4 seed so you can get home court advantage in the first round. And I looked at the schedules of the, you know, teams that are 6 through 4, Portland 6, right? You know, they can definitely achieve that. You know, I think 4 through 6. Lakers are 4, Nuggets are 5, Portland 6. Lakers without LeBron and AD pretty much for the rest of the season. Yeah, Portland can surpass them. They should. And then Denver, that'll be a toss-up. I looked at both their schedules, but I think they will pass Denver. So, be interesting to see. I mean, because if Portland can get that 4 seed, Portland's one of the better home teams in the league. They should have won the first round if they played Denver, right? If they had to play the Lakers in the first round, it might be tougher, but if they're able to play Denver in the first round, yeah, they can beat Denver if they have home court, right? And Portland's a team I could see pulling off a lot of upsets in the playoffs this year because, as I mentioned earlier, all the holes they had in the last couple of years, rebounding, defensive, right, the defensive end of the floor, they filled all those holes. And you know they got the scoring. They got the scoring, and they got the guys who have the right attitude to play. Right, they got the clutch players, too. When you have a clutch player like Lillard, you're always going to have a chance to win playoff series, right? So, you know, with Lillard playing at an all-time high level this year, with the amount of scoring that team has, with the addition of Norman Powell, right, who might be like the best number 3 option Lillard and McCollum have had in a long time. And also, like I said, with the increase in defense that this team has brought in, right? And as well as, you know, the rebounders they brought in, like Enes Kanter, right? And Simons being much better off the bench this year than he was last year. That helps their bench, right? They got more depth, too. So every hole they had in the last 2 or 3 years, they filled, right? So it'd be really interesting to see, you know how they perform in the playoffs because, I mean, they're playing really well in the regular season, and they always do. But they just seem like they have a different attitude this regular season than they have had in the past. Like, they just seem like they're out to, like, prove someone wrong. Like, they just seem like they're out there and they just look different to me. When I watched them the last 2 or 3 years, like, even in the regular season, like, they look great. But this year, they just look like, this looks like a whole different team. Like, this looks like when I looked at Portland the last 2 or 3 years, I looked at them and was like, okay, second round exit, right? At best. Right? Now I look at them and I'm like, it's a team that can win the whole thing. Might be a crazy take, but that's my opinion, right? I mean, to me, the biggest threats in the West in them are obviously the Lakers. I think they could beat Phoenix. I think they could beat Utah. Right? I think they could beat Denver. I mean, I just think the Lakers. I think they could beat the Clippers, too. I'm not too impressed with the Clippers this season. I'll get to that in a little bit. They have no depth. I think they're going to really struggle in the playoffs. Right? I mean, your third best player is Serge Ibaka, right? Like I said, we'll get to that, but I'm not a big believer in the Clippers this season. But back to Portland, I mean, other than the Lakers, I think Portland, in my opinion, when I watch all the teams in the West play this year, I think Portland's the second best team. And I don't care what the record says. McCollum missed 2 months. Think about that. It's a long time. It's a shortened season, right? So, I don't care what the record says. I think Portland can beat just about anybody in the league in a 7-game series. You know, and let's say they do get to the finals. I mean, who do they play? They play Brooklyn, maybe, right? They play Milwaukee, maybe. They play Philly. I mean, Philly's my pick out of the East to come in the finals, right? I'm not going to say Portland's my pick out of the West yet, you know, because I'm still thinking about that pick, but Philly's my pick to come out of the East. I'll explain that on the, you know, in a future podcast, but tell you, man, Portland, I think Portland can come out of the West. I'm not saying they're going to. I think they can. Like, I mean, they just got one of the best players in the league in Lillard, man. And that backcourt is just as good as it gets with Lillard and McCollum. And they have a lot of good defenders now. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because you have a lot of these teams this year that are kind of like surprise teams, like Phoenix and Utah, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. But you know, what is Phoenix going to be able to do in the playoffs, right? What is Utah going to be able to do, right? Not that they're not good teams. It's just like, will they be good in the playoffs? I mean, because, you know, Portland's shown playoff success before. Utah's shown solid playoff success. Phoenix hasn't been in the playoffs in decades, so we don't know what they'll be able to do, right? So, it'll be cool to see Portland in the finals, really. I mean, it'll be great. Imagine if they play Brooklyn in the finals and they beat them. Can you imagine that? Somebody like Damian Lillard, who's like probably the most loyal player in the league, other than like, Steph Curry and guys like that. But imagine a guy like Damian Lillard in Portland, they knock off Brooklyn in the finals. Imagine that. Like, just think about that. Right? Like, think about that. That'd be crazy, because that would be like so much of a like, just like a screw super teams type of a mentality for Lillard, because if he could beat that team, one of the craziest things in sports history. Not really a big fan of all these guys going to one team and forming a super team. We'll get to that on another podcast. I'll talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets, but I'm going to wrap it up here in a minute. But let me just finish with this. I'm not a huge fan of it. Right? I like when there's more balance in the league, right? And the Brooklyn's a hell of a team to watch. They're a hell of a team. They're great to watch, but I like when there's more balance in the league. I don't want it to be so top heavy. Like, I like when there's more balance. Like, you remember the NBA before the Warriors were like top of the league, right? Great team to watch, the Warriors team. They were great. But think about the league before that. Like, okay, yeah, it was the Heat and the Spurs a lot in the finals, but like Indiana always gave Miami like those tough series, right? OKC beat Spurs that one year. Even the couple years before that, the Lakers were getting to the finals, It was just, and then Orlando the year with Dwight Howard, it was just more balanced, right? And I think that's what the league should be like now. It should get to the point where it's more balanced, right? I think we have better players in the league now than we've ever had, but the balance is just like so favoring 2 or 3 teams, and it's just like, it makes it really tough for some of these other teams that do much. Like, Utah is an unreal team. We're like, are they going to be good enough to beat the Lakers? Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, I don't know. There you go, look at the East. Like, Milwaukee's a great team. Can they beat Brooklyn? Like, I don't know. I'm just not the biggest fan of this whole super team thing. Like I said, we'll get to that in another podcast. But, I mean, it's good for the league, I guess. They're able to generate more views and stuff. And, it's good for some of these guys' legacies. But for a basketball fan, I've been a basketball fan for a really long time. I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and hopefully, somebody can knock off Brooklyn in the playoffs. Man, I would be happy to see that. No disrespect to Brooklyn, I would just be happy to see somebody knock off all those guys that teamed up just to get a ring. So we'll see what happens, but that will wrap up episode number 1 of the podcast. And again, go give me a follow on Instagram when you get a chance. It's the Sizzle Podcast. And thanks for tuning in today. See you on Thursday.